Right now, you're listening to a $90 microphone that looks, feels, and sounds like a $200 microphone. This is the FIFINE AmpliTank Tank 3, which FIFINE was kind enough to send out for a review. But after spending a bit of time with it on my own and reviewing some of FIFINE's other options, I was really surprised with how good it actually is. I've been using the $200 PodMic USB for my videos since early this year, and just a couple of months ago, I reviewed the $55 AmpliGame AM8. But what made me curious about the AmpliTank was that as far as features and pricing go, it basically sits right in the middle of both of them, being a step down from the PodMic and a step up from the AM8. Right away, you can tell that FIFINE isn't exactly going for fun and flashy like the AmpliGames. Those are meant more for streaming, whereas this is designed for things like podcasting. You could probably use it for Zoom calls as well without getting weird looks from your peers, since it's designed to be more professional and understated. It's also made entirely out of metal, except for a few plastic pieces here and there like the knobs and the thumb screw, and it definitely ranks number 2 in the most substantial feeling microphones I've ever used, almost edging out the PodMic USB in the number 1 spot. Personally, I think it's important to have something like this be well constructed because ideally you want a microphone like this to be a lasting part of your setup. As for controls, the AmpliTank is pretty similar to the AmpliGame AM8 in that it has a mute switch as well as knobs for gain and headphone volume. The major difference is that the mute switch is a physical button instead of a touch sensor. If you saw my video on the AM8, you know that I accidentally pressed the mute switch during one of my outtakes, and I'm glad to see that FIFINE included an actual button this time around. Like the AM8, FIFINE designed this to work over USB-C and XLR, but you also have a headphone jack in case you want to listen back to what the mic is picking up in real time. It's nice to see them give us both options since it gives you a lot of added flexibility, and if you ever decide to get something like an interface or a mixer, you don't have to worry about buying a brand new microphone just to use it. Now let's talk about sound quality. I went ahead and switched to my PodMic USB just to give you an idea of how it sounds, and right off the bat, you can definitely tell a difference. The PodMic has a built-in DSP for onboard processing, so you can add some low end or some top end, as well as some audio effects like compression. It also has a pop filter that helps cut out breathing sounds, as well as some of the harsher sounds like your P's and your B's. The AmpliTank, meanwhile, is a lot flatter out of the box, and there's no software to customize the sound. And even though it's not quite as good as the PodMic, it does perform surprisingly well for the price. I've been recording with it angled right in front of my mouth, so I haven't exactly been very easy on it, and even though it has picked up a lot of breaths and harsh sounds, it still sounds a lot better than I expected. The AmpliGame AM8 is also different with a more natural emphasis on the highs and lows. It kind of feels like it's trying to go for something a bit more consumer friendly. I personally like how it sounds, but the AmpliTank does sound more neutral by comparison. I wouldn't necessarily say one is outright better than the other since everyone has different preferences, but I definitely think the flatter sound of the AmpliTank works in its favor. Going back to the AmpliTank, I really like the single arm yoke design compared to most other microphones that tend to use a dual armed yoke. But if I had to nitpick, I would have liked to see this be able to rotate 360 degrees like the Elgato Wave DX. But aside from that, it's built just as well as the rest of the microphone, and it has 3/8 and 5/8 inch threads built in, so you should be able to fit it on pretty much anything. That being said, if you're looking into getting a stand or a boom arm for this, and you definitely should considering it doesn't come with one of its own, I would highly recommend staying away from the cheaper options. Cheap arms aren't designed to hold heavier microphones like this, so you should definitely consider looking into something like the BM66, which FIFINE was also kind enough to send out to me. It's designed after some of the more expensive options like the $100 Elgato Wave Arm, but it's priced quite a bit lower at $65. If you're going to spend a bit more on a mic like this anyway, you might as well get an arm that'll last as long as the mic. Right off the bat, it's definitely a lot bigger than the one I've been using, and it's got quite a bit of weight to it. The arm itself is made of metal with plastic covering the beams. The plastic basically creates 2 cable channels, which helps clean up the look compared to a lot of other mic arms that leave the cable exposed. Those cable channels are held in place by a couple of rubber strips. Compared to the magnets used on something like the Elgato arm, this should hold in place a lot better. The disc clamp is also padded on both sides, so it shouldn't damage your desk when you install it. In the past, I've used a smaller arm from Newer that runs for about $30 to $35 on Amazon, and it's been great for holding heavier microphones like the PodMic USB. The BM66 holds microphones like this just as well, but I've found the BM66 to be a bit smoother and easier to move around. The mount also feels a bit more stable, so this hopefully should end up lasting for a long time. The arm uses a 1/4 inch thread by default, but also includes 3/8 and 5/8 inch adapters to attach your microphone, which is a bit odd considering this is meant for microphones which use 5/8 inch threads anyway. But on the plus side, the adapter is attached to a ball joint that gives a lot more flexibility. The last arm I used forced me to slightly unscrew the microphone just to turn it toward my mouth, but with this I can just loosen and tighten the ball mount as needed. Personally, I'm really happy with it, and it's definitely a big upgrade over my older arm. I definitely think it seems like a better value compared to some of the more expensive options, and it looks fantastic. But all that being said, are either of these options right for you? Well, let's start with the AmpliTank. If you're looking for the best possible bang for your buck, I still recommend the AmpliGame AM8. It sounds great, looks great, and has pretty much everything you'll ever need for only $55. Plus, you can get it with a small stand or a boom arm and you'll still come out ahead. If you do go for the $90 AmpliTank, that extra $35 will get you a more compact form factor, a more professional design, better build quality, a flatter sound signature, better resistance against pops, and all physical controls. Honestly, if you're wanting something that you can keep long term, I really think it would be worth spending the extra money. But what about the BM66? Well, if all you want is something that'll just hold up your microphone, you're not necessarily interested in all the extra doodads, then the newer boom arm is a really good option for only $35. But if you're interested in the $65 BM66, that extra $30 will get you better build quality, a sleeker design, integrated cable channels, and a ball mount. Honestly, after using the newer for over a year and a half, I seriously love this new one, and it definitely feels like a strong upgrade. If you want to pick up any of these options for yourself, I'll be sure to leave links in the description. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all around. Adios.